Coffee Lab. I'm Mike. I'm glad to have you here today. Glad to have you guys join me as people join in on the channel here. I've just got a couple of little housekeeping notes to mention to you guys. First of all, can you hear me? I guess that would be a question. Just want to make sure my audio's good, and then we'll get started here in just a second. Okay. All right, good. All right, that sounds great. Okay, awesome. All right. Well, you guys, I'm so glad that you're here today. Again, welcome to the Virtual Coffee Lab. This is only the second time I've done a live stream, so I'll try to be as smooth as I can as we go along here. Just a couple little housekeeping notes, as I mentioned. The first is I would love for you to participate in the chat. I just ask that you subscribe, even if you don't want to be a subscriber, just subscribe during the chat, the live here, so you can participate in the chat. And then if you don't want to be a subscriber, you can unsubscribe after. I just do that because it helps kind of eliminate some of the spam that can happen on some lives. Not that there's going to be any here, but just in case, that's really helpful. And if you guys could check in, tell me where you're from and what roaster you have. You can see that there on the message. That would be awesome. Share a little bit about what you are doing in your roasting. And what I'm going to do is tell you a little bit about what we're going to be doing today. I want to be sure that you guys don't think that I'm going to tell you what the best roaster is for you. You're going to figure that out for yourself. We're going to be talking about what the best coffee roaster is for you. And that's really what the purpose of this. It's not about a popularity contest for a roaster. It's not about bashing a different roaster, something other than what you have. If you're not happy with your own roaster and you want to bash it, I guess you could do that. But, we'll talk about that. So that's totally cool. All right. So let me just say hello to a few people here. This is Sharkstown. Hey. San Jose, California. That's cool. So you guys are a few hours behind me here, and you're using the popper from Sweet Maria's. That's awesome. You can see the popper right here in the background. I've got the popper. I've used it, and I've roasted some really good coffee on the popper. So that's great. Awesome. Congratulations. All right, Kelly's Home Cafe. Hey, we've talked online on some of the video comments. Thanks for being here. You're from Australia. Dude, that's, I don't know, it's tomorrow there right now, isn't it? I mean, that's, you're up late or you're up early, one or the other, but I'm glad you're here. Thanks for being with me here today and supporting me in this channel. That's awesome. And yeah, you do have the Genie Cafe, and hopefully you've been getting some great roasts out of that. I hope my videos have been helpful for you. So thanks for sharing that. All right. So Michael, I'm in Michigan. I roast on the Mill City, owned by a friend. All right. That was my son. So I've got a little bit of family here watching and supporting me as well. All right. Tempting Fate. Longtime subscriber. Thank you so much, you guys, for subscribing. That's one of the best things you can do, is to help me support this channel by subscribing. That's awesome. And more importantly, hit the like button right now. That would be wonderful if you could hit the like button. That will help my live right now show up as people that are checking out, or have looked for coffee roasting topics on YouTube. If they happen to be on YouTube, they'll see my live show up in their feed, hopefully. So thanks for all the great content over the years. Behmor, and let's see, Behmor 540. So a Behmor, you've got a Behmor, right? Or is it an SR 540? I'm not sure which one you've got there. And you're from Half Moon Bay, California. Beautiful place. Thank you for joining me today. I'm glad that you're here. All right. This is Nathaniel. Nathaniel is currently roasting on a popper and a free coffee. I'm not sure what a free coffee is. And Gary from Portland, Gary is on a fresh roast SR 540. All right, Gary, you can see my 540 in the background as well. And maybe you've seen some of my videos. That's a great roaster. I've had a lot of fun on that roaster. So feel free to share more comments along the way. Oh, we've got Ken. Ken is joining us. All right, Ken. Ken, I've engaged in conversations with you on some of my videos. Thanks for being here today, supporting me. I really appreciate it, Ken. And you're using an SR 800. That's the sister of the SR 540. And I know that you've roasted some really good coffee with that roaster. So what's the purpose here of this talk? What is the purpose here of this live? Other than I really love the engagement. I love the interaction with other home coffee roasters. It's one thing to kind of, do it maybe on a social, but to have a little more interaction like this, it makes the hobby maybe a little less lonely, and we can learn some things and share some things. And that's really what I love most about this hobby, other than roasting some great coffee, right? But the purpose of this time here is to help those that are watching and those that will be watching on the replay later. This will be available. Understanding the differences of coffee roasters, the home coffee roasters that we're going to be talking about today. So we're going to be talking about roasters that are in the range of $800 or less, and really the most popular roasters. We want to understand the differences between these roasters, especially if you're considering possibly changing to a different roaster and maybe deciding on a purchase. Or if you're new to roasting, especially if you're new to roasting, you're trying to figure out what the choices are. It seems to be a little overwhelming. And sometimes the information online can be a little misleading. And hopefully this will be a source for you that will be more helpful than confusing. So if you're not happy with your current roaster and you're trying to figure out what your choices are, this is another reason and another purpose for this live stream here. And if you're just not happy with your coffee roaster, one of the things that I've even said when I've been roasting on some of these is, man, I'm not really a fan of this roaster. I'm not really happy with it. And then I realized that it had so much capability, so much potential, and that I just wasn't operating it to its most optimum level. And so I learned that with the cafe, the Genie Cafe. I learned a really important lesson, which I share with you guys, and that is that we've got to understand what the limitations of our roaster is, and then we've got to figure out ways to work around those limitations so that we can roast some really, really good coffee. So that's the purpose of our conversation today, and that's what we're going to be doing. And I want to share just for a minute a little bit of my experience with these roasters. I've used each and every roaster that's here that we're going to be talking about today, some more than others, but I've had experience with all of them. I roast every week on a 500-gram sample roaster. It's a commercial drum roaster made by Mill City, and you guys may have seen that in some of my videos. So I'm using the roasters, and I'm also talking to people like you guys about your roasting experiences and some of the challenges that you've had. And while I'm roasting on these different roasters, I'm getting an opportunity to kind of compare the differences, hands-on compare the differences. So hopefully my experiences will be helpful for you and the things that we're going to be talking about today. So what we're going to do is we're going to be highlighting briefly each of these roasters behind me, and I can kind of get out of the picture here for a second so you can see the other ones. We're going to be highlighting these roasters and looking at some of the specs on them just really briefly on each one so that we can kind of engage in this conversation. So at any time, if you have questions about a specific roaster that's here, throw it down in the chat and we can talk about that. If you want to see something up close, I guess I could grab something and try to give you a closer shot and let you maybe see some of the pieces and the parts of the roaster. These are all really unique roasters. I mean, the way that they handle chaff is differently. The way that they handle how they use power settings for heat or for fan, it's all different. So if you want to get a little more of an up close look, we can do that as well. Okay, we've got a comment from Jerry. Jerry's from Aurora, Colorado, using an SR540. Welcome, Jerry. Thanks for being here today. Thanks for sharing your comment. And I'm glad that you're here today to support this channel. So you guys, I really appreciate you being here. Sometimes doing these videos and doing this channel get challenging for me, and it gets a little lonely because some of you interact with me, but it's really helpful to be able to see people come out, and that encourages me. So I really do appreciate that. Okay, we are going to get into slideshow here, and we're going to be taking a look at each of these roasters briefly, and we're going to talk about price. I'm mentioning all of these things because all of these points, as you see, there'll be some similarities. We're going to be talking about how much they cost, the type of roaster they are, whether it's an air or drum, whether it's a manual or automated roaster, how you're controlling the heat on these roasters, temperature display, whether it has a chaff system or not, and whether you can hear first crack and see the coffee. All of these things are really important when we roast coffee, and we'll be talking about that. Let's start with the SR540. The SR540 and the SR800 we're going to look at here are very similar. $210 for this roaster gives you a great roaster. It's a hot air roaster, so the way that this coffee gets hot is simply through hot air. It's not necessarily through like a hot surface on a drum. So this is a hot air roaster, and this roaster efficiently roasts 4 ounces of greens in this roaster as it stands. There are modifications for this roaster to have a longer extension tube, which I have here, and I can show you. I've got a video on that as well. Totally changes the roaster, and you can roast more coffee. So this SR540 can go from 4 ounces to 6 ounces of coffee, no problem at all. It's a manual roaster, so you're not going to push a button and just walk away. That's really not what this roaster is designed for and what it's all about. It's a hands-on roaster. You're going to want to be there to watch the color change, and you're going to be able to see the color change great, and you're going to be able to hear crack really good. But there's one knob on this roaster, and this knob is a multi-function knob. Push it and it lets you adjust the air. Push it again and it lets you adjust the heat. And then if you twist it, it allows you to see the temperature that's being displayed. As I mentioned, there's a chaff system on most of these roasters. This one has a chaff system. It basically blows the chaff up into the top, and there's a little screen that keeps the chaff from blowing out of the roaster. There are modifications for that too, so you can hold more chaff and you can allow more air to come out of the roaster to help you with the loft and to try to keep your temperatures down. This roaster likes to run hot. You can really roast coffee quickly with this roaster. So this is a good choice. $210 for this roaster. All right, the SR800 is basically the same thing. The capacity is a few ounces more. You throw a extension tube on this, and there's a couple different variations, and you're roasting quite a bit of coffee in this roaster, maybe 8 or 9 ounces, maybe even more. If you've got one of these and you want to share how many ounces you are roasting, if you have the extension tube, throw that down in the chat. That would be awesome. Again, it's a manual roaster. Everything else is the same with this roaster as well. I've never roasted on an SR800, just the 540. A couple of you here have the popper, and this is really a bargain roaster. You know, one of the things that I said when I started roasting was, man, I'm roasting on a popcorn popper. And I thought if I could only control the heat and the air on this roaster, that's all I would need to do. And Sweet Maria's did that with this roaster. So it is, I'm not even going to, well, it's a glorified hot air popcorn popper in a sense, but most hot air poppers, they all function in the same way. I mean, you're blowing hot air out to roast beans. With the ones you can control air, you're controlling the volume of air that is being pushed through the greens as they roast, and you're able to change the temperature as well. So, and that's not a criticism for hot air poppers. I really enjoy my fresh roast. I get some great roasts out of it. Okay, so here we have the ceramic roaster that's behind me. And I did a couple of videos on this, And it is surprising that you can get some decent roasts out of this roaster, but it is bare bones. There is no, it's just manual roasting all the way. 2 ounces of coffee, totally manual roast. Visibility is okay. You can see in the little hole. You'll need a flashlight to be able to see the color change. And you can hear first crack pretty good. The Behmor, I started roasting after the hot air popcorn popper on my Behmor 1600, and then I upgraded the Behmor from a 1600 to a 1600 plus. $480 is one of the more expensive home coffee roasters in this $800 and less range. My roaster is still working. I haven't had any mechanical problems with it. I have really kind of been hard on that roaster at times. It's been a great roaster. The manufacturer claims 1 pound capacity. We're going to be talking about capacity because I would never roast a pound of coffee in the Behmor. That's just not a way for me to be able to get really good tasting coffee. So if you've roasted on a Behmor, if you're doing that and you're roasting 1 pound of coffee and it's taking you 15 minutes to get through a roast, I would encourage you to cut that volume of coffee in half and then try your roast again. You'll find that it moves a lot quicker and it'll be a totally different coffee roasting experience for you. Okay, it is a drum roaster. It is not an air roaster. It uses a quartz heating element. It's semi-automatic where you can push a button P1 and it'll roast a temperature profile, but it's not going to drop the coffee. It's not going to turn the cooling, automatic cooling on unless the timer kicks in, and then it will do that. So I guess I'm calling it a semi-automatic roaster. You can control the heat and you can control the drum speed. You cannot control any air movement. There's a fan that turns on automatically depending upon your what load you choose, 1 pound, half pound, or quarter pound setting. See that in my videos. I talk about that. It's got a temperature display for both the bean. They call it a bean temperature, and then it's B and A. A is the air temperature when the fan kicks in. There's a chaff system. It's a really pretty good chaff system if you keep the door closed. And it has a smoke system, an afterburner, where at the very top of the roaster, it will burn some of the smoke off. So this roaster may smoke less than some of the other roasters that we're talking about here today. It's got visibility is okay or good for looking at beans. Sometimes you have to crack the door open or you've got to use a flashlight to get a really good look. On my 1600 plus, my light is kind of yellow. I think most of your lights are probably that way. And so it's kind of hard sometimes to, judge color change. All right, we're just got a couple more here and then we'll get back to the comments if there are any. The Hive roaster. This is a surprise. I've got the Hive roaster here. This is one of my favorite roasters. I really enjoy roasting on this. It's totally manual. You can roast 6 ounces of coffee. You can control the heat and the air in this roaster based on the way that it's designed. You control the heat on how far away from the flame. You're basically holding this pan over a flame. And the design, there's a hole in the center on the underside, so the heat comes up into the dome and circulates. So the more you circulate the Hive roaster, the more air movement you get. And honestly, you get some really even roasts on this roaster. So I'm really happily surprised. And just for your information, the Hive comes in 3 variations. It comes in, like you see here, just the saucer base with the dome, but it also, and that's $75, and it also comes in a digital version, which I use in my videos, which shows a temperature display. There's a bean probe that goes down into the bean mass while you're roasting, and so you're able to see your bean temperature. And then there's it's not digital, I forget what it's called, but it basically, instead of showing a temperature digitally on a digital like thermometer display, it actually plugs into Artisan, and you can use this hooked up to Artisan. So this is a really, really great roaster. The chaff system, the way that this is designed, when I'm done roasting, all of the chaff that was in there is burnt up and it's in little tiny pieces. So it's really easy to sift out. The smoke system, there isn't really a smoke system, but by its design, that gets so hot in that air that a lot of the smoke is evaporated from the temperature. So there's not as much smoke with the Hive that I've seen in other roasters. And visibility on this roaster is not that great. There's a small hole in the top, and you're going to need to be able to have a flashlight and a quick look to see bean color. But after you get used to that, it's not bad. And you can hear crack just fine on this roaster. Hive is definitely a really great roaster to consider. You can take it with you somewhere. If all you need is a flame. I guess you can use it with electric stoves, but you should check with the manufacturer before you make a purchase and have a conversation with Matt. Just tell him what it is you're using for your heating device, and he'll make some recommendations. Also, a hot air popcorn popper. That's what I started out with here. 25 bucks, 30 bucks. You're going to get a hot air popcorn popper that has no control. 4 ounces max for your beans. You can't control heat or air. And quite honestly, if you want to roast good coffee, you need to be able to control at least your heat at a minimum during the roasting profile, and you'll be able to roast some pretty good coffee. Visibility, you got to take the lid off in order to see the color, and the cracking sound is very clear on this roaster. No problems there. All right, last but not least is the Genie Cafe. The last couple videos I did roasting coffee, I did with the Genie, and it is a surprisingly really nice roaster. 8.8 ounces is what the manufacturer says you can roast. Again, that's what they say you can roast, but you'll probably want to use less coffee than that when you're roasting. Totally manual roaster. You can control the heat. There is a temperature display. It is a hybrid roaster, so this is using hot air and the glass drum turns. So it's kind of not a drum roaster, and it's not just a hot air roaster. It's kind of a combination. It's pretty cool. You'll have some conduction where the beans are touching each other because the drum isn't turning really, really quick at all. But it's turning enough where it's getting great consistent roast color in the roasts. Chaff system, it has probably the best chaff system of all the roasters I've talked about, because the air blows through the roasting chamber and it blows the chaff out and it goes into the end. You can see here on the left side of that roaster, there's that little box with a little chimney. That is awesome. And you can even hook up a flexible dryer vent tube to that exhaust and then vent that out a window. So if you're somewhere and you need to deal with venting, this probably is one of your best solutions for that. So the visibility, seeing the coffee, is really, really good. And the cracking sound is not so great. It's really important to be able to hear first crack. There are some tricks that you can use to get a better ear on hearing first crack take place on this roaster, but it's difficult to hear first crack on that roaster. Okay, so that's the overview of the coffee roasters, and I've got them all here. And if you guys want to ask some questions, go ahead and do that. And let's see. Greetings from Connecticut. Let me get back to where I left off here. All right, Nathaniel's from Connecticut. Great to have you here. I think we talked about that already. Let me get back into the comments, guys. Okay. All right, we've got a guest user from Japan that is, Taiwan, currently roasting on a SR800. Enjoy your videos. Thank you very much. Yeah, what time is it in Japan? I'm sure it's really late there as well. Thank you so much for joining me today. I really appreciate it. And I'm glad that you've watched my videos and they've been helpful for you. That's awesome. Awesome. Okay. Oh, and it's Tom. Hey, Tom. All right, good. Great. Glad to have you here, Tom. Thank you so much for being here again. Okay, so 8 ounces. without the extension tube and 10 ounces with the extension tube on the SR800. Thanks for sharing that, CGW Sales. Thank you so much for sharing that. Yep, Ken is agreeing 8 to 10 ounces with the Razzo extension. So yeah, so there are factory extension tubes for the SR series, and then I'm not sure if the 540 has a Razzo, does it? I'm using the factory extension tube, but the SR800, a lot of people are using the Razzo extension tube, and there is an artisan port, like a probe port that you can slide through the glass, which is pretty cool. All right, question from Tempting Fate. Is there a substantial difference in coffee flavor upgrading to a drum roaster from, say, an SR540? Oh, man, that's a great question. Substantial difference. Let me answer that question this way, because I do, you're right. I mean, I roast on a drum roaster. So, Mike, what's the difference between your drum roaster and all these other roasters? Honestly, I think consistency is one thing that is a big difference that I can achieve here with my drum roaster. So consistency. But you're asking about coffee flavor. So let's just say that everything goes exactly as planned. Is there a difference in the coffee flavor? The answer is, for the most part, no. I had a conversation with Rob Hoos. He's a professional roaster. He's a consultant. He's written some books. And I asked some different questions with Rob. I've got a video on that conversation. You can check that out. It was pretty interesting. But he said, when I asked him about different roasters, kind of like what we're talking about today, he introduced me to the Hive. And he shared with me that he had some people coming in to taste some coffee, and he roasted some of these different profiles for this coffee on the Hive. And I think the best coffee they picked happened to be a roast from the Hive. So I'm sharing that with you just to say that it's possible to roast some awesome, unbelievable coffee on almost any roaster. For most of the roasters we're talking about here, I'd say that probably 2/3 of them, you'll be able to roast some really good coffee with them. But it's the consistency, and it's really, sometimes there are things like changing up your profiles, right? So if you're trying to work with different profiles, going from a light roast to a dark roast, trying to do something for espresso where you want a low and slower roast, it's easier to do that, say, on a drum roast, but it's not impossible to do it on these other roasters. You just got to figure it out. So does that answer your question? I hope it does. All right, Kelly's Home Cafe and Roastery. I started out with a popper, popping back in 2020 when I first started roasting. Yep, a popper is a great entry-level coffee roaster. And when I say entry-level, I'm talking, because it's not real expensive. It's not a huge commitment, and it gets you started really quick with both variables, heat and air. So I'm glad you're happy with that. Yeah, 2020. Gotcha. All right. Frisco or Fry Coffee is a hot air roaster up to 100 grams manually and auto settings. Great visibility, but on the loud side, purchased on Amazon. Interesting. I'll have to check that out. What does that cost, Nathaniel? Just curious. That sounds really interesting. I'll have to check that out. Okay, let's see. Have you used the Bullet roaster yet? Okay, the Bullet. I want to use the Bullet. I've talked with people that use the Bullet. I know somebody from this channel, actually, Lou, who's been on one of my Behmor videos. He has a Bullet. He's offered to let me use it. I don't know, Lou, if you're watching here right now, but so I will be roasting on the Bullet. One way or the other, you'll see the Bullet on this channel, and we'll be doing manual roasts. We'll experiment with it. So yeah, we'll be taking a look at the Alio Bullet. I've been on this channel for 2 years, and all of these roasters that I have here, except for the Genie Cafe, I've had to buy myself, or they were given to me as gifts from like my family. So I'm not making money on this channel. I mean, this is not like something I'm going to retire on. And, you know, I've got to make a little bit of a commitment when I buy these things. So I want a roaster that I think is useful for me, that I can use. And I want to be able to relate to you as I'm talking about coffee roasting. If I just had the drum roaster, I wouldn't really be able to relate to you as well as I can right now, because I've had experience with these roasters. So yes, the bullet will be here eventually, and we'll get that on the channel. All right. Bet Menacin have had to use mechanical stethoscope with the Genie Cafe to hear first crack, as originally only hearing large beans crack. Have heard it every time, regardless of the bean type. Now, that is awesome. I mean, you can get a cheap stethoscope online. That's a great suggestion. I've heard other people where they'll take a paper towel tube and they'll hold it up close to the air vent, the exhaust vent, to be able to hear first crack. And that's what happens when we use roasters that have limitations. We try to figure those out. 9:26 in the morning in Japan. Good morning. Good morning. And thanks for being here again, Tom. I really appreciate that. It's great to have you here. All right. Is that Ken from Razzo? I have the Razzo chamber. So yeah, I think that's, I don't know if that's the Ken that I've been talking with. If it is, that's kind of cool. But yeah, the Razzo is a very popular extension tube. Jim Miller can roast with the Genie in the kitchen with dryer vent out the window and no smell. Yeah, that is a huge thing. And we're going to be talking about this real briefly here. I've got really 4 or 5 points for us to kind of consider as we're trying to figure out what the best coffee roaster is for us and our needs. So yeah, we'll do that. All right. Gary, there is a 9.5 Razzo for the 540. That's cool. I might have to check that out. I prefer the factory extension with 200 to 225 grams of coffee. The Razzo chaff extension, in my mind, is a must-have. So I've got the Razzo chaff extension on this. I'm pretty sure I do. But I've got the factory extension tube, so that's cool. And that's a lot of coffee. That's a lot of green coffee for the 540. So that's really good. That is really good. Thanks for sharing that. All right, Nathaniel says the fry coffee is $165. So yeah, I'll definitely check that out. Yep. Any thoughts on the Kaleido roasters? Is that the Snipe and those roasters? I've reached out. I actually found one I thought was a really reasonable price, and I guess that roaster is, I think, manufactured or under a couple different brands. That's the one that has the sides that kind of like a gull wing kind of open up. I don't really have a whole lot of thoughts. I know that it uses an infrared heat source. And I think when I looked at it, I was looking at the capacity on it, and I think maybe there's a couple different sizes. So I don't have any immediate thoughts on it. I know that there's a couple viewers here that have one of those roasters, and they seem to be happy with it. So another nerd. A buddy of mine has the Bullet Roaster. Awesome compared to my Behmor. Love the PC interface. Graphs are always cool. For the price, I'm happy with my Behmor for now. So, yeah, the Bullet. So I was on vacation a couple weeks ago, and I was up northern Michigan, and I ran into a viewer of this channel, and he is roasting coffee out of his house, cottage industry, and he's selling it. He's selling it at the local markets, and he uses the Behmor, or not Behmor. He uses the Alio Bullet, and he's working that thing. It's a workhorse. He's roasting a lot of coffee in that, and that's what a lot of people are doing. The Behmor was the roaster to use to kind of get started in selling coffee at the local farms and all that. And it's still popular. People still use that. I know Sabbath Coffee, Trevor, started out using a Behmor in his business, and now he's got a 12-kilo roaster. He's roasting thousands of pounds a year. Sabbath Coffee Roasters rules. Trevor has been a great supporter of this channel. And yeah, so I'm hoping to actually roast on that 12-kilo roaster. So you may see a video on that soon. So yeah, people that have the Bullet love the Bullet. It is pricey, but you know what? It's a good piece of equipment. And I haven't heard anybody tell me that it was overpriced and they weren't happy with their investment. So there you go. Daryl's got the Sonafresco, his first roaster, mid-range in price, but the roasting is fantastic. So your Sonafresco, I think, aren't there different sizes? What did that cost, Gary or Daryl, if you don't mind sharing? I'd be interested to hear that. Sonafresco is a name. They do make some commercial roasters, air roasters that people are using. Ray's here. I've been talking to Ray online. Great to have you here, Ray. And I'm glad that you're here supporting me and listening. So welcome to the Virtual Coffee Lab live stream. CGW Sales. So this is Mr. Razzo. Ken Razzo? No, that's not. Who is that? I'm not sure what yes is referring to. Sorry about I maybe forgot the question. Let's see, Tempted Fate. Your favorite roaster under $1,000 for the most consistent results. You're asking me my favorite roaster. I have a couple of favorite roasters. I really love the Hive. The Hive is one of my favorite roasters. I can't ignore the Behmor because I've used it for so many years. I kind of have a love for a Behmor. I am biased when it comes to the Behmor. But I mean, every time I've roasted with the Hive, it's fun. It's a little tiring, but it's been fun. The fresh roast, again, surprises me every time that I use that roaster. I roast the fresh roast on low, like a 2, and it's very powerful. So very impressed with that roaster. But I think I want to come back to, you asked the question. It's a great way to ask the question because you're not asking what the best roaster is. You're asking what my favorite is. So I really enjoy the Hive. I think I really enjoy the Genie Cafe because it's so easy. That's a tough one. It's really a tough one. I can tell you what it's not. The popper's not my favorite. I like the popper, but it's not my favorite. The ceramic roaster is not. That's my least favorite roaster, and I'm not really a fan of the ceramic roaster. It's hard to get a good roast on that. Hopefully I didn't dodge your question too much there. Frederick, if you were looking to learn how to become a professional roaster, where would you go to learn, and how many classes or how many different roasteries should be busted? That's a great question. That really is a great question. So there's a lot of different ways to do this, right? You can learn on your own. I learned how to roast coffee from trial and error and from watching Mill City videos, coffee videos, and also from reading online and also reading some really good books. Scott Rayo has some really good books that talk about roasting concepts and roasting theory that are really helpful. Rob Hoos, again, it's another person that is really, really good at what he does, and he's good at explaining it too. So I think those are really helpful. I took a intro class at Mill City, Understanding Basic Concepts. And honestly, what I'm sharing with you here are a lot of those basic concepts mixed in with my personal experience and things that I've read and learned about. So you can learn a lot online. Where I would be very careful is just the real general social forums where there tends to be a lot of comments with, and some of those you need to be guarded with because you really don't know, what level of experience they have. And ultimately, what that coffee is like. And I guess you could say that with me too. You haven't tasted my coffee. I've had other people taste my coffee and they've been very happy with it. I don't always roast great coffee, but I would say, classes, you can do online classes. There's a couple really good sources. Rob Hoos has an online class that he offers, a whole training program. He's a consultant, and so you're going to pay for that. But if you want to be a professional, then that's an investment, right? Depending on the roaster you're going to buy, Mill City offers some really good roasting classes in person there or online, and their training seemed to be reasonably priced. I was at the SCA. We got to watch our time here. I was at the SCA out in Portland this year, and I met a few viewers from the channel, and one guy, I think he was legit. My family always plays jokes on me, but he watched my channel, and he was a professional coffee roaster, and he said that my channel was a huge influence for him. So I think a lot of the things we talk about, and if you take these things that we discuss, my videos, the concepts, and you work with those and try it yourself and experiment, you will be able to roast some really, really good coffee. I think one of the most important things you can do is share your coffee. You really need to have other people taste your coffee. Start with family and friends, and then kind of work your way out. So I hope that that's helpful. Daryl, is that the $3,000? That's the Sana Fresco, right? Yeah. So professional roasters, a lot of cafes are using a Sana Fresco, and I saw them at the SCA, and they had some really nice looking equipment. So I'm glad you're happy with your roaster. Awesome. Okay. Bat Medicine. I'm having trouble hitting a 5-minute dry on the Genie Cafe. Tried limiting the weight down to 130 grams, but still around 6 minutes dry. Any tips on dropping it down to 5? So the preheat is going to be really important. You need to do a preheat, not just until it gets to that temperature, but let it run at that temperature for 10 minutes, 15 minutes. Just let it get nice and hot, and then have the hot gloves on, and when you do your transfer, just do it quick, get that roast started. And if you're down to 130 grams, you should be able to get close to that dry. It sounds like you must be using a higher density, like an Ethiopian or higher density coffee, because if it's like a Brazil or something like that, that should easily get there in the 5-minute. Hopefully that's helpful. Visited. Okay, Frederick, thank you. All right, Michael, do you have home roaster recommendations for someone that prefers light roast style with a snappy acidity? Michael and I have been experimenting with lighter roasts, and I've been mostly a medium roast guy for a long time, and so we've been experimenting. And you saw one of my experiments with the Genie Cafe and the light roast. That coffee was amazing. It was really, really delicious. Very happy with it. So as far as recommendations go, is that the question? Do you have any recommendations? Roaster recommendations. Okay, so that's a great point. One of my points in the Genie Cafe video was that once you learn the limitations of your roaster, you make adjustments and you try to work around some of those limitations. And I think that would be interesting to do for all of us. If you want to try a lighter roast, then one of the fresh roast for me, I've really had challenges getting a good light roast because it seems like I'm really getting the heat, or the temperatures really get high in that roaster, maybe higher than I want, so that when I try to kind of back the heat off, I always seem to overshoot my light roast in that roaster. So I've got to figure out a way to get around that. So it may mean that I need to stretch my roast out a little longer and have a little lower temperature approach and see how that affects. Snappy acidity for me is shorter development time. So, you're balancing your cup, right? So you've got acidity, you've got your sweetness, you've got this overall balance that you're trying to achieve. If you don't want a fruit bomb, you use a little more development time to kind of slow down or soften the acidity, right? So if you want snappy acidity, you're going to probably have a little shorter development time, and you may even want to, depending upon the type of coffee you're roasting, you'll want to mess around with that middle phase time. So if you're using percentages, you might want to go on the shorter side of 30%. If you're looking strictly at times, you may want to look at about a 2-minute, 2.5-minute development time. Not development time, middle phase time. It depends on the roaster you're using, so it's kind of hard for me to describe that. But can you do it on each roaster? That's a great question. That's something I'm going to be experimenting with, and I would encourage you guys to do that as well. All right, Daryl, they make a 1 pound and a 2 pound, and he has the 1 pound in the PC interface. So this is the Sana Fresco. Awesome. Awesome. Thanks for sharing that. All right, Frederick, I tried the online classes. I'm more of a hands-on person. I don't like online training or the online thing. I get that. So one of the things you can do is kind of befriend a local coffee roastery. So find somebody that is there and then ask them maybe if you can hang out and watch a roast. Don't bother them. Don't pester them. But, first patronize them, buy their product and talk about it, talk about roasting, talk about your experiences. And a lot of those people will engage you and they will talk to you, and they may even sell you some of their greens. So if they're roasting some really, really good coffee, they can talk to you about that, maybe talk about their profile, and then maybe you can buy some of their greens and try to roast a similar roast. That's something that I've wanted to do. I was just talking with my son about that this week. There is somebody who is selling green coffee and roasted coffee. They're really known. It's Scott Rao. He sells greens and he sells his own coffee. And I said to Michael, it'd be really fun to roast a green coffee that he's selling, and then buy the roasted coffee as well and taste both. So hands-on, Frederick, I get it. I would try to connect with somebody that has a roastery that'll give you some time. Just be kind to them, encourage them, and patronize them, and they should respond nicely. Gary, I can do 225 in my SR 540 basically, mainly because I have the fan upgraded to the 800 fan. Interesting. So is that the same size base? Does the 800 have the same size base? Frederick, I picked up a Buckeye BC5 and need more training. Oh, okay. So you've committed to a drum roaster and you need some more training. I get that. I would definitely watch the Mill City's Roaster Schools videos and watch what they talk about. I've got a couple videos that talk about charge temperature. They talk about the dry phase and why it's important and what the purpose is. And it talks about each of the phases. And so I would encourage you to check out my essentials playlist, start with that. And then maybe, email me. You can reach me via email. And if I have time, I'll try to give you some other suggestions, Frederick. So hopefully that helped a little bit. Kelly, Home Cafe and Roastery. I love doing medium light roasts, and I can get some really strong roasts, and many people have said my coffee is like rocket fuel. Share your coffee. You guys, it's one of the best pieces of advice that I can give you is when you roast, share your coffee and get feedback from others. That's what I would just encourage you to do. I've got a video on how beneficial that is. And you know what? You may get some criticism. So, you don't want to find people that are just looking for Starbucks type coffee, because that's not really going to be helpful for you unless that's your goal. If you're really trying to roast specialty coffee and you're looking for origin and notes that are definable, then you want to find people that are into coffee, that are into specialty coffee, and then have them taste your coffee. Richter Stitcher purchased the fresh roast SR540. Only have used it 2 times. Still need lots of learning. Thankful for the Discord coffee group that I am involved in. With just need more time. So yeah, and that's really cool. So a lot of these roasters have their own groups whether it's Discord or Facebook and all that. So I'm glad that you're able to engage in that type of community as well. Yes, you did. So you watched the Mill City videos. I've watched the Mill City videos several times, and I've gone back because there's a lot of wisdom in those videos. And there's some really, even when they do some of the roast alongs, especially the older roast alongs, there's some really helpful clues that they share as they're roasting. And Richter Stitcher says the SR 540. Yep, gotcha. Yes, same base, same heat for the SR 800. All right, awesome. One of the things you can do to roast some really great coffee is to buy good quality beans as well. That's probably the biggest thing you can do. Richter Stitcher, I have some Good Brothers green beans. Need to get a few more roasts under my belt. All right, awesome. Last comment here, and then we'll get to my points real quick, and then we have to wrap things up. What are your thoughts on the Behmor roaster? I've had a Behmor for 12 years. I love it. I've roasted some really, really good coffee with it, and you have to kind of push its limits. You have to know what its limits are. So it has limits on its total heat capability. Like there's an emergency shutdown if you get too hot earlier in the roast. So there's some safety features. You got to kind of know how far you can push it. You really can't roast a lot of coffee in that roaster if you're trying to get a good medium or even lighter roasts. You're going to want to have a lighter load in that. So I love the Behmor. I'm a fan of the Behmor. Are there other roasters that'll roast great coffee? Most of these that are up here will roast great coffee. It's all up to, what it is you're interested in doing with your coffee. Wouldn't mind an M10 someday if I get the hang of it. M10, is that the Kaleido roaster? No, which roaster is that? Lou, I just shared with Lou that you offered to share your bullet with me. He's using a bullet roaster and have standardized on 350 gram batches. In my best light to medium roast, I usually have a 3-minute Maillard phase, never scrimp on the middle phase. Yeah, the middle phase is so important for flavor development, you guys. The middle phase of roasting coffee is where a lot of the magic happens, and then you kind of work that later third phase in to kind of balance things out to your own liking for what you like, right? So that's really important. For newer roasters, one of the biggest challenges is to control the roaster. And when we don't control the roaster, it gets out of control and it pushes too fast, too much heat through that middle phase, and you end up with coffee that isn't as good as it could be. So great recommendation. Great comment, Lou. Thanks for sharing that. Okay, you guys, I have just a few points here. So if you're looking for the best roaster for you, these are some things to consider. I shared some of the different features of these roasters, but some things to ask yourself, some things you need to consider when you're looking or shopping. The first real thing is ultimately it's going to be price. You may have a limited budget, so that's going to more or less kind of push you right into a certain roaster or a certain type of roaster. So price is something that is going to be a major factor in finding the best home coffee roaster for you. Your roasting environment is really important. I have so many questions from people that ask me, hey, Mike, I'm roasting in an apartment and I've got neighbors that complain about smoke. What can I do? So, there's issues with smoke and ventilation. Some people roast out in their garage and some people don't have garages, or they don't have a house, they have an apartment. So there's some limitations. Some people end up roasting outside, and in the winter months, that's really, really hard for consistency. When you've got outdoor temperatures, those are going to influence your total roast time. Neighbors smelling smoke. I was talking to somebody, several people online who have drum roasters or roast outside, and they've had neighbors complain about some of their smoke or smell because they're really close together. And chaff mess is another factor too. So your roasting environment and, what you can stand, can you have a little chaff blowing around? Can you have a little smoke? Not quite enough to blow the smoke alarms off, but it'll create a little smell. Are those limitations for you? Those are things you need to consider. The Behmor is low in smoke unless you go dark on all of these. Whenever you go really dark on your roasters, you're going to get smoke. So if that's the case, then you're going to need to have good ventilation, a hood fan, or figure out a way to get some sort of venting to draw that air out so that you don't have that take place. What are your roasting goals? Do you just want the ability to control your roaster, and you want to use this roaster that you're going to buy to be able to roast the best possible coffee? Well, if that's the case, the more control you have over your roaster, the better. And consistency is another thing. Consistency in your roasts is really important. And some of these roasters are a little more squirrely than others. The popper is kind of squirrely. The ceramic, I don't even want to talk about the ceramic. So I have good days and bad days on the fresh roast. And it's not the problem with the roaster. It's the problem with me trying to use both the air and the heat to control the profile of the roaster. That's really, really challenging for me. If I could use the example of a joystick, like a video game, back in the day, in an arcade game, you'd have one joystick, right? It was fairly easy, a joystick and a button. And on the new stuff, now you've got 2 joysticks, and you got 4 or 5 buttons. It's just a little bit more, and it's a little harder to be able to get the hang. There's a bigger learning curve to get the hang of some of these roasters that have that, like the fresh roast. What some people do is they, try to not change both settings at the same time. They'll change the fan a little bit early on, and then they'll change the heat maybe for the second half of the roast. So that's just something that you're going to have to kind of consider is, if you have a roaster that has full control, then it's going to be a little bigger of a learning curve for you to work on. But it's going to get you one step closer to being able to roast more profiles, more different types of profiles. Ease of use. If you're looking for something easy, a push button in this range of coffee roaster, the Genie Cafe is easy. The Hive is not that hard. There's a little bit of a learning curve. It's a totally manual roaster, but it's up and down. It's just the up and down and then the amount of coffee you roast, and you'll be able to time your roasts. I've got a video called Taking Control of Your Roast. If you're interested in a Hive, watch that. I can nail my event times within a couple of seconds with that roaster. It's really, really a cool roaster. The flexibility of the roaster is another factor you need to consider with your roasting goals. Is if you're only interested in dark roast coffee, then that's not so difficult. But if you want to roast dark and you want to roast light roasted coffee and you want to roast really, really good coffee and really focus on your profile, you're going to want to have a lot of control. And it's not going to be as easy to use. It's not going to be a simple push button. So it's going to take more effort. Whether it's a manual or auto, these are all manual roasters except for the Behmor, which has kind of a semi-automatic. So if you're just looking for something like that, the Behmor may be a little easier for you. The Behmor and the Cafe, Genie Cafe, seem to be kind of, I'll call them slow motion roasters. Things seem to happen a little slower during the roasting events than you would have with, like, say, the fresh roast or even the Hive. So yeah, those are things to consider about your roasting goals. How far do you want to take this hobby, right? And that really kind of goes towards future plans. What are the next steps? If you've already got a hot air popcorn popper and you want to move up, what do you want to do? Is this just for you and your family to share coffee? Then the choice is, pretty easy. But if you're looking to use something as a stepping stone to move into a drum roaster, there is some thought between using air roasters versus drum roasters because they operate differently. It's a little different style of roasting, but understanding the basic principles of roasting, if you've got a good grasp on that, it's not going to be a problem. But that might make a difference in which roaster you want. You might want to start off with a Behmor or a Genie that's not like just a full-blown air roaster if you're interested in drum roasting. That might not be a real fair analysis, and you guys can share your thoughts if you want on that. So, and then lastly, how much coffee do you need in a week? If I'm trying to roast coffee on this ceramic roaster for me and my family and sharing with friends, I'm going to end up getting really frustrated, and I'm not going to have consistent roasts using that. So I want a roaster that's got a little more capacity. So I would stay away from like the popper, and I would probably go towards something that has more capacity. If you're an air roaster lover and you really like that style of roasting, get an extension tube and the SR800. Then you can roast a lot more coffee, or even the Genie Cafe. Maybe not as much for volume. There's some people that do a lot, but those roasts tend to get really long. So it all depends what you're interested in. But those are things that are going to help guide you to find the right roaster, the right type of roaster for you. All right. All right, Jay, thanks for your feedback about the Behmor. You're very welcome. The M10 is the Snipe, and it is from Kaleido. Yes, awesome. Yeah, that's the one that's got the little gull wings, right? So, yeah. Did you say you use that? Are you happy with that roaster? M2 is probably a better size for my needs, just roasting for my husband and I. Okay, so yeah, you do have that roaster. Yeah, so what's the capacity of that roaster? All right, we're getting close to the end here, gentlemen and ladies. What about aromatic finish to the roasting process? How to get certain aroma out of the coffee? Boy, that's a great question. That has been something that has really kind of surprised me. Some coffees that don't necessarily have, like some of the high density coffees, it seems like it takes longer for those coffees to give off a really good aroma. You're talking ground coffee, whole bean, or are you talking brewed aromatics? I had a coffee today. It was yesterday. It was a Honduran coffee, and it smelled like a grape popsicle. It smelled like it, and then when I tasted it, it was like grapefruit juice, like Welch's grapefruit juice. It was quite something, and that was a light roast coffee. So I think if you're not getting aromas, I would ask, what roast level, how long, what kind of development do you have? Are the quality of the beans good? What type of bean is it? Those are great questions. I just don't know how I can answer that right now. I wish I knew what time you were going live. Yeah, I put it out, I think, a day and a half ago. And I did, so I didn't have it originally in my social post, but I added it later for 8 p.m. Sorry about that. I'll try to do a better job the next time. Thanks for that comment. And thanks for being here. I really appreciate you being here and supporting me and being a part of this live stream. All right. Actually, no, I'd love to get one only user of the 540 currently. Okay, so you don't have the Snipe. Gotcha. Yeah, if you've got a Snipe, I'd like to hear a little bit more about your experiences with it, anybody that's using a Snipe. I really like my Boca Boca. It is hard finding info on it and ways to improve my roast. Okay, yeah, so the Boca Boca isn't that the wood box, and it's got the glass drum inside of it? And I think that's an infrared roaster as well. So I think the best thing you can do is, if you're interested in looking on my channel, look at the essentials playlist that I have. I know there's some older videos in there, but the concepts, the things that I talk about are really helpful to help you understand what you need to do to get your roaster to do what you want it to do. And that's kind of how I try to share things here on my channel. I try to do this so that I'm not giving specifics for a specific roaster unless I'm actually roasting on, and I'm trying to explain how I'm using that roaster. In my tips and my roasting theory videos, like the essential playlist videos. Those, I'm talking about concepts, and those concepts can be applied to any roaster. So for the Boca Boca, you need to be thinking about, how powerful is your roaster? How long will it take for you to get that roaster to dry your coffee? That helps you understand the capabilities of that roaster and what you need to do to kind of tweak that. If you're packing a ton of coffee into that roaster and it's taking you 10 minutes to get the coffee dry, then you're going to need to use less coffee. So watch the Essentials playlist and experiment a little bit with your roaster, trying to achieve and trying to control your roaster to these events that we talk about, like dry end and first crack and second crack if you're going really dark. M2 is a smaller capacity than the M10, but I like their features maybe someday. Yeah, they've got their own roasting software too, I think, don't they? Yep, Woodbox and infrared on the Boca Boca. Yeah, yep, awesome. Okay, well, you guys, it is time to wrap things up. Thank you so much for being here today. Thank you for joining me here at the Virtual Coffee Lab. Again, hit the like button, you guys. That really helps me out. I would really appreciate that. This video will be available on replay after I, basically let it process on YouTube. So this video will be available for later viewing. And I really appreciate you watching. Thank you so much for being here today. And I hope you guys have a great week roasting. We will see you next time. Take care. Bye for now.